Hello, sexy listeners. I'm ThatPodcastGirl C-Dub, and this is a podcast about house music. Today's episode is sponsored by Cindy Wang at Douglas Elliman Luxury Real Estate from the Garden City office. Let's get into it. Somewhere along the way, the DJ booth stopped being a place where records were simply played. It became something else. The DJ inside it was no longer just selecting songs for a crowd. They were shaping the movement of an entire room, stretching time, bending rhythm, guiding the emotional arc of the night that might last 8 hours or more. And that transformation began in rooms where the booth was barely large enough to stand in. Picture this. Ron Hardy is already deep into the night. The booth at the music box is cramped, the mixer wedged between two turntables, record sleeves stacked wherever there is space. By 3 a.m, the air inside has warmed from amplifiers and the heat rising from the dance floor below. The crowd moves like a single organism under the low ceiling. Hardy drops the needle on a record the room hasn't heard before. The rhythm is stark, a drum machine pattern pushing forward with very little melody attached to it. For a moment, the dancers hesitate, like, WTF? A few people stop moving, trying to understand what they're hearing. Hardy watches them quietly. Then he lifts the needle and plays the record again. Same track, same groove, and he does it again. Somewhere between the third and fourth pass, the room locks into the rhythm and the entire floor begins moving together again. That record is Acid Tracks, produced by Future. Years later, DJ Pierre recalled that Ron Hardy kept replaying the track until the dancers demanded to know what it was. From the dance floor, it looked like stubbornness. Inside the booth, it was something else entirely. Hardy had realized that the DJ could guide a room toward a sound it didn't yet know how to hear. Across the city at the warehouse, another booth was quietly shaping the mechanics of that idea. Frankie Knuckles stood behind 2 turntables and a mixer, his headphones resting partly over one ear while the other stayed open to the room. Certain grooves on the dance floor worked so well that dancers didn't want them to end after 3 minutes. Knuckles began experimenting with ways to stretch those moments. Extended drum sections, tape edits, percussion layered across records so the rhythm never dropped away. The floor around him was often scattered with white label records sent over from producers hoping to hear their track in the room before it was officially pressed. Small pieces of tape sometimes marked the label of a record, a cue point DJs used to see exactly where the first kick drum began. When the lights dropped low enough that the grooves were hard to see, a small flashlight clipped to the mixer illuminated the vinyl just long enough to place the needle. From the dance floor, the night felt seamless. Inside the booth, Knuckles was constantly adjusting, nudging the vinyl forward with 2 fingers, easing the pitch slider until 2 kick drums aligned perfectly, blending the bass from one record beneath the percussion of another. The DJ wasn't simply selecting music anymore. The booth itself had become something closer to an instrument. When the culture reached New York, that instrument became even more powerful. Inside Paradise Garage, Larry Levan stood behind a booth surrounded by a sound system designed specifically for that room by engineer Richard Long, who we covered in a previous episode. Multiple turntables with a tape machine, rotary mixers fixed with frequency isolators. Levan used those controls the way a conductor uses a baton. At certain moments, he would remove the bass entirely from the track, twisting the isolator so that only percussion and vocals floated through the room. The dancers kept moving, but the floor suddenly felt lighter, almost suspended. Then Levan would bring the bass back in. Hundreds of people reacted at once. From the dance floor, it felt mystical. Inside the booth, it was simply a movement of the hand. People standing near the booth rails sometimes watched closely, studying how the records moved and how the mixer shaped the sound. In fact, I was one of those people. The DJ booth had quietly become a performance space. At this time, another piece of equipment made that performance possible, the Technics SL-1200. When Technics released the direct drive SL-1200 in the early 1970s, they could not have predicted it would become the defining instrument of DJ culture. The motor was strong enough that DJs could hold the vinyl still while the platter continued spinning beneath it. In the headphones, the next record played softly. The DJ aligned the first kick drum, adjusted the pitch slider until the beats matched, then released the record at exactly the right moment. To dancers, it sounded effortless. Inside the booth, it required constant micro-adjustment. Beat matching turned two separate records into a continuous musical surface. The DJ now had control over time itself. And sometimes that control had to happen in real time. Every DJ from that era remembers the moment when two records suddenly drift apart, the kick drums beginning to flam against each other, the rhythm of the room starting to wobble. Inside the booth, there is no pause button, but the DJ feels the drift immediately. One hand stays on the mixer while the other reaches to the vinyl, gently nudging the edge of the record forward or pulling it back by the smallest fraction of a second. Sometimes the pitch slider moves slightly. Sometimes the DJ rides the platter itself with fingertips until the beats fall back into alignment. From the dance floor, the correction is invisible. The groove never breaks and the room keeps moving. But inside the booth, the DJ has just saved the entire moment. As house music spread across the Atlantic, clubs began designing rooms that supported this kind of control. When Ministry of Sound opened in London in 1991, its founders studied American club systems like Paradise Garage and built the club around sound first. Engineers spent months tuning the room so bass traveled evenly across the floor. For DJs stepping into that booth, something changed. They didn't have to fight the room anymore. They could blend records slowly, sometimes letting two tracks sit together for minutes while the dancers sank deeper into the groove. The booth had become a place where a DJ could shape the architecture of the entire night. That philosophy reached its fullest expression in marathon sets. On the island of Ibiza, DJs played through entire nights and into sunrise. At clubs like Space, a set might begin while the terrace was still dark and continue until daylight washed across the dance floor. Inside the booth, the DJ watched the horizon brighten while the rhythm of the night shifted along with it. The room itself had become part of that composition. In New York, that long-form tradition found a home at Twilo. Danny Tenaglia stood behind the booth, watching the room carefully, the way DJs had always done, quietly reading signals dancers gave without realizing it. Early in the night, the music stayed deep. Percussion, long blends. Gradually, the energy rose, and vocals appeared. By the middle of the night, the room might erupt into something euphoric. 8 hours could pass that way, sometimes more. Tenaglia once described those nights simply. You're not just playing records, you're programming the night. That idea captures the transformation that had taken place inside the booth. The DJ had become the conductor of an entire environment. And the memory of that environment hasn't disappeared. Just this past weekend, nearly 3 decades after Twilo first opened its doors, dancers gathered once again for reunion night, where Danny Tenaglia returned to play long sets in tribute to the room that defined an era. People didn't come for nostalgia alone. They came to experience something specific, the slow unfolding of a night, guided by someone who understands how a room breathes. Inside the booth, the next record is already playing in the headphones. The floor can't hear it yet. The DJ holds the vinyl gently under 2 fingertips while the platter spins beneath it, waiting for the moment when the rhythm in the headphones aligns with the rhythm of the room. Then the record is released. I'm that podcast girl C-Dub, and this is a podcast about house music. I'm taking a short break since spring break is coming up next week here in the United States. Please take this time to explore the 25 previous episodes where we break down the history and influences of house music. One last thing, guys. My first shout out goes to Miss Amy Dabbs, DABBS. I'm going to read her recent bio featured on Frequence Club's post. London-born Amy Dabbs is a Berlin-based, Renata resident, multi-genre artist who has recently played Panorama Bar, launching her label Dabbs Tracks, which is now a monthly Berlin party series, performing at Her Berlin and The Lot NYC, collaborating with Coco Bryce, and featured on BBC Radio 1 and BBC 6 Music, cementing her as one of the most exciting names in contemporary UK dance music. She's playing this Friday, March 13th at Frequence Club in Tirana, Albania.